There's unhappiness in the DA tonight over the party's second Deputy Federal Chairperson, Natasha Mazzone. Senior DA member Khume Ramulifho says Mazzone was appointed in a unilateral decision, raising issues around the lack of diversity in the party. Well, he has threatened to take the DA to court over the matter. But the party says it's confident the process was above board and the move won't affect the party's performance in next year's election. For more on this, we are now joined in the studio by Khume Ramulifho. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for joining us. Well, first of all, why was this issue not handled at conference?
No, the reason why we didn't deal with it was the fact that we didn't amend the Constitution by the time of voting. So if we have amended the Constitution on Saturday, this issue will have been resolved. So unfortunately, the voting started on Sunday between 6 and 9. And the time when we started making amendments to the second deputy position, it was the time when people already voted. And the argument which we raised at the Congress was that we could not vote for the second deputy on the basis that when people have voted, the position was not created by the Federal Congress, because we maintain that the Federal Congress is the highest decision-making body as stipulated in the DA Constitution. So that is the issue. It's not all about an individual. It's just an issue of principle to say you can't vote for a position which don't exist. So you can only vote for it when it exists. And that is the matter which we're actually raising.
Well, James Self believes this is a small matter that can really be dealt with by having conversations among all those concerned. Do you share that view?
It is possible, but when you look at the DA Constitution, you look at 11.3.4 and 0.5, they indicate that if a Federal Legal Commission makes a decision, the only way to review such a decision, it has to be High Court. So that is the only way. So if there are other conversations which you might have, they are welcome, and we already had conversation with James, but it's what the DA Constitution indicates. So I think it's all about whether testing, whether how do we then make sure that our rules and regulations are tight enough so that there are no gaps, because I think it's just the test of how do we get into that. So it's not really a problem. We can get into that and resolve as long as it's all about our Constitution, because it's a matter of principle.
So where's the matter at now? Are you still going to court, or are you going to carry on with the conversations that you're saying have already started between yourselves and James Self and other people?
As I've indicated that in terms of the DA Constitution, I've written to the Federal Executive Chairperson, who is James Self, to say, can the Federal Executive take this matter for High Court for review? Because that is what the Constitution requires us to do. So that is where the matter is. I've written, and then he also indicated that we need to have a conversation, which we're likely to have that next week, so that we can look at the matter.
Isn't this yet another indication that there are a lot of people within the DA ranks that don't see eye to eye with most of the members, senior leaders of the party?
No, not necessarily. Remember that we're talking about the Congress. At the Congress, that is where the party has to restructure itself. How do we reposition ourselves so that when we go out, all our issues are in order? And that's why we strengthen, especially when it comes to the party constitution. So that's why the focus is, how do we make sure that our constitution don't have gaps where we'll actually leave us without really finding each other? So that's why we brought the matter at the Congress, because we have the view that when we have an opportunity to amend the constitution, we do that at the Congress. And that is why we're saying we need to encourage that, and we must respect the decision of the Congress. And that is why we're raising this matter as a matter of principle. So it's not necessarily implying that we are dissatisfied. There will be instances where we disagree, but that is why we exist in a political party. Because if we think the same, we will not grow. But as long as these differences are based on principles, and the Constitution make that provision from the party side.
Well, aren't these really, suppressed feelings that some of you actually have, and these are real? Gavin Davis, who is your MP, admitted in a piece he wrote recently that there was consternation at conference over the whole diversity clause, but he reduces it to a problem around formulation. right? And then the same Gavin had spoken of real conservatives, which people like Makashule Ghana took exception to. So what I'm saying is it does seem like there are other members, senior members of your party that we've been speaking to in the run-up to the conference, for example, who were unhappy with the way Patricia de Lille has been handled. So these things have been bubbling, you know, there. They are there, and maybe you're just not bold enough to put it out there that you are having serious problems with some of the leadership positions, or some of the positions that some of your leaders hold.
Oh, we are a growing party which also faces challenges as we grow. And that's why we need to encourage all members who, when they've got issues, they must use the party platform and engage and say, this is how we need to do things. Let's look at how do we best improve how we either communicate or how do we handle matters. But as a growing party, we have people who might not necessarily agree on certain issues, but that doesn't necessarily imply that the party is at war with itself. So that just indicates that people can express their views, and that is what our constitution actually guarantees, that all members can express themselves without any fear or any prejudice. So where we agree, we agree. Where we disagree, we disagree. So we should not leave a room where we cannot disagree, because otherwise we will not grow. And that's why even when we elect leadership, you elect leadership for a particular period, and when you are not happy with whatever leadership is doing, then you have got an opportunity to remove that leadership. And that's why we encourage regular elections. And these elections must be free and fair at all the time. So I don't think or consider this as necessarily a big issue per se. It's just an issue of how do we clarify this misunderstanding. So the organization is still there, but we need to clarify so that even members who are at Congress, they have a clear understanding what was the decision or what is the decision, and how do we go about it. So if there are gaps, it's our responsibility to fix those gaps so that we don't go forward when we know that we still have challenges. But I think we encourage a robust debate. As you also indicated, the issue of diversity was also debated. We had a huge discussion about it. It was a lengthy one for that matter, so I think it took about 3 hours. But the important thing there was we were open and we were frank and we deliberated on the matter. And when the matter was also tabled for Congress adoption, equally we find each other. And I think that's the strength of the Democratic Alliance, that we allow such opportunity where we engage, and after engagement we find each other and then we move on.
Mr. Ramulifho, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
You're welcome.
He's, of course, a member of the Democratic Alliance, unhappy at this stage with the way Natasha Mazzone's post, or has been appointed to the post of second Deputy Federal Chairperson after the party's Federal Congress. But as he was saying, they will look at the matter. The discussions are still ongoing, and he hopes that the matter will still or can still be resolved.